Hey, I wanted to spend a little time talking about a recent experience that we had. I got this notion. I've seen a lot of ads for using a VPN for added security, and they got a lot of good selling points and everything. So, and obviously using VPN for work and providing a secure tunnel to things got me thinking, oh, maybe that's a nice way to add some more security to what we're doing if we are accessing our bank and things like that. And started researching what some good VPNs were and what's involved in getting it set up and how much they cost and all that sort of thing. And then was looking at what else you can get from it. And one of the big things that you hear about is being able to basically proxy from a country, even where if you are being blacked out from like a sporting event here for streaming, you could use the VPN to log into a server in another country and then pay for a subscription service in that country to be able to watch the games from there or watch a TV show or whatever it is. So that was something that always intrigued me. So, looking at these things, kind of the stars started aligning to say, hey, maybe this is a good time to try it out. So I did some research into it and settled on using ExpressVPN. So I wanted to, after this whole last couple days of getting all that set up and doing different things, kind of wanted to go through and share what those experiences were and my opinions on both ExpressVPN and just VPNs in general and all that sort of thing. So to get to the gist of it, I did the ExpressVPN and got it all set up. We got it all working and we used it for a couple days. And I have since completely turned it off and went back to our old system and determined that whatever small gains we would have gotten from the VPN are not worth the hassle that it was causing us in our connections and things like that. So that's the gist of it. And that's not a knock on ExpressVPN. I mean, their stuff did what it was supposed to do, but just want to talk through some of the ins and outs that we had. So our main thing was just looking at it from the standpoint of additional privacy and not allowing ISPs and stuff to see our browsing history and stuff like that, so we can be a little more anonymous on the internet. Not a huge concern, but it was something that was intriguing. We didn't necessarily see us doing the whole proxying thing from another country. I was toyed with the idea of trying that because there are some shows that we don't have access to here and sporting events that we don't have access to or not as easy access to. So that was something I was looking at trying. And then some notion of additional security when we're doing banking and things like that. So I went ahead and moved forward. And once I settled that I was going to do it with ExpressVPN, I started looking more about how to do that. And so one of the reasons I went with them is because they had an option to use a brand name router that you could flash with their firmware, and you could do the VPN at the router level so that every device inside your network was then covered with the under the VPN. So that sounded great. So because you only are allowed 5 devices at a time to be connected with it. So naturally, if I can get the router going, then all of our devices in the house would be covered and I'd only be using one of those licenses. So that sounded great to me. And so then it was a question of which router do I get? And I settled on this one here, which is the NETGEAR R6700 version 3. Ordered it from Amazon. It was $65 for it from Amazon. That required me to have to do the flash myself. I could have bought it through, they have this flash router company that I'm assuming is some kind of partner with ExpressVPN that would have allowed this to, it would have come pre-flashed with it on there. I don't know what else they provided because it cost $65 from Amazon and they were going to charge $230 or something for it. And if they're charging you more than $200 more or almost $200 more just to load the flash, that seems pretty excessive. So anyway, I just did the one from Amazon. I've updated firmware before, so that wasn't really a concern for me. And that went fairly well. I got it and did just downloaded the firmware and did the update. And when you update it, I was foolishly, I guess, hoping that when it would load, the firmware was basically going to be essentially the NETGEAR, but with some added ExpressVPN functionality. But as you would probably more expect, it just completely wipes out all of the NETGEAR configuration, and what you get is a whole different system. When you log into it, you see nothing but the ExpressVPN, and most of the functions of that NETGEAR would provide in their software are gone, and you get only just the ExpressVPN stuff. So that wasn't a huge deal. I just was just different from what I expected. So the setup was really straightforward. Once I got connected to it, I set up my account and paid for the service and got logged in, and there's an activation code that you use, and boom, then you're connected to the VPN. It automatically selects a server and everything. And the nice thing is that you can create these groups, and so you can have a group that's going to one VPN server, you can have another group that uses no VPN, and you can have a different group that goes to a different VPN server. So, and then you can pretty easily move the devices between everything. We had a little bit of a challenge at first because I set up this VPN, this router as our VPN, and then I essentially just plugged in the Google mesh that we were using for our network into it. But as you would expect, then the only device that it sees is the Google mesh. It doesn't see any of the individual devices. So basically it just sees this one thing. And so you lose all that granular control where you can try to move a PC from one of those groups to another. So that said, okay, well, we need to take this to the next level. Let's split everything out. And I think by that point we had actually even started having a few problems with our streaming stuff. So we said, okay, let's get rid of the Google mesh. And so I pulled out all of those, reconnected everything so that then everything was connected into the ExpressVPN. And I was able to see all the devices, spent a lot of time trying to go through each device, and some of them came back with the device name, and so it was pretty straightforward. Oh, okay, that's this PC, that's this cell phone, whatever. Other ones were a little more cryptic. Like I think the PS4 just had like the MAC address, and I had to figure out, what is this device, and we had to hunt it down so I could give it the right labels to say, okay, that's PS4. The PS3 came through labeled just fine. It said this is the PS3. And a lot of other devices it was kind of hit or miss. So we went through and did all that. Got most of that sorted out. Tricky ones were things like our smart light bulbs and things where it's not easy to find what the MAC address is for those, or at least not without like removing them. So I didn't go through that hassle. So, but otherwise it was, I mostly could figure out at least that this is a smart device versus this is a router, or versus this is a PC or a cell phone or something. And one thing that was annoying was that some devices connected more than once, and I wanted to delete the old ones. And so they have an option in the interface where you can say to forget this device, but apparently it doesn't forget it right away. It says it can take up to 24 hours, but I waited more than 24 hours and it still didn't forget those devices, and they weren't valid anymore. So it was kind of annoying that they were just there and I couldn't just delete the thing. So that was just more of a nuisance. So, but we got it set up and we're working with it. And then we started having assorted issues. They were just nothing major. The first day we were using it, I think this is when we still had the Google mesh in there, Amazon streaming wouldn't work. It tells us that we're on a VPN and therefore it's not going to work. Netflix was working, but it kept dropping the connection in the middle of the show we were watching. It would drop. And so we presumed that was because of the VPN. Joseph came and told us that he was trying to watch some of the animes on Netflix and they weren't showing up as available. And so then the next day I moved to a different VPN server. I moved from the Atlanta server to the Washington DC server, and then he could see all the animes and they were there just fine. So, which was strange that would be the case. I don't know why you would be able to see them from one server and not from the other within the United States, because we haven't changed any locations and anything like that. There's also some restrictions because YouTube will not let you put comments on a video if you are on a VPN. So you just get a message saying comment failed. And so we had to switch it to, that was another case. I think I switched to the DC server and it worked fine. So the DC server apparently doesn't come across as being a VPN, at least not yet. So that worked okay. But that was some of our initial things. And then we started, we let it run for another day, and we were keeping tabs on different things. And the, hang on. So we continued on for another day, and we're just kind of keeping an eye on how things were going. And it's basically the same types of things. I mean, I set up all the different groups, and I moved our streaming things to the no VPN so that we didn't have any issues with that, and that solved that problem. The DC server seemed to solve a lot of the other problems, but then, we run into little things like your shopping on like Lowe's or something, and when you go there, it defaults to saying that your current location is Washington DC, and it's giving you the inventories of all the stores around Washington DC, and it's like, well, I'm not in Washington DC, so I got to go and update my store, and then every time I go to Lowe's it does the same thing, and it's kind of just a nuisance if anything else. In some cases, we were getting prompted to have to do the reCAPTCHA stuff too, because like Google was thinking that we were maybe spam or something. So we're just trying to do a search on Google, and you're having to force to identify yourself as not a robot, and so that was kind of another nuisance item. So there was just a few of those things, and along the way, I did some additional research into VPNs and was looking at, the true value that they're adding. And we had our things that we were planning on using it for. And, just kind of started asking the question and saying, okay, well, we don't really see ourselves doing the proxy thing. That's something that's out there, but, we're not kind of big on that. So, we pretty much just make do with what we have. And if we don't have access to a show, then we don't have access to the show. And we don't really go out of our way to try to watch it, to trick anything to watch it. We'll just wait for it to be available. So we're pretty patient with that. The security stuff is really not necessary because all of your internet connections through your browser are using the same encryption that a VPN is going to use. So, you're sure if you have the VPN, then your encrypted connection is inside of another encrypted connection. And you could say that that's another layer of protection, but that encryption is pretty strong, and it's going to be hard to break through that. So that doesn't really mean anything. And then the only other thing you had out there is the anonymity, and saying, all right, our ISP won't be able to see where we're going or anything like that. But it's like, do I really care? We have, you're doing so much browsing and whatnot that it doesn't make a whole lot of difference where the, if someone sees where you're going, so that's never been a major concern of ours. So using that as a reason to have the VPN doesn't seem to make much sense. So, and in watching other things, I couldn't see any other reason to have a VPN. So we basically got to the point after a couple days of using this that it's like, does the benefit that we get from it warrant the additional nuisances that are coming from it? And considering that our stuff is probably 90+% secure as it is, just using the normal security that comes with the browser and all that, and we don't really plan on using the other features of a VPN, then it's really kind of more trouble than it's worth. And that was where we ended up. So it took us a couple days, maybe 3 days of using it to kind of get to that point and say, all right, well, that was a good experiment, but that's not really, it doesn't really work for us. There's no, we're putting a lot of effort into something that's really not giving us a whole lot of value. So we decided to pull it out. So I went and pulled out the router. That's why it's sitting on my desk here. And we went back to the Google Mesh, which provides some of the functionality that we like, and and feel pretty secure, just as we always did. I don't feel that we're giving up any security by not having the VPN. I think it's there are some cases where probably it would come in handy, like if you're traveling and you're going to be on an unknown network, that some Wi-Fi at some remote coffee shop or at a hotel or something, maybe there's some benefit to having that VPN from your phone or from your laptop or something to help give you a little bit of peace of mind. but that's not a huge concern for us, so it wasn't something we needed to do. So so that was that. That was our experience with the VPN. The last thing that we had is that now that we're pulling it out, I have this router, and again, paid $65 for this router, and I flashed it with the ExpressVPN firmware, and now I'm kind of like, well, I would like to be able to use this router for something else. I don't know what I'll use it for, but I don't like the idea that I just spent $65 and now I'm not going to be able to use it at all. So I said, what do I need to do to get this back to being the NETGEAR firmware? Which seemed like it would be pretty straightforward. I thought the first thing that I would try is just to do a hard reset using the reset button on it. Went through that. I was hoping that there was a ROM chip in there that would be read-only and would just load it to the factory defaults. Apparently that doesn't work, because every time I would do it, it would just bring it right back to the ExpressVPN. So I'm presuming there's not that type of chip in here. So and the firmware is just, every time you update the firmware, it resets whatever that reset setting is. So that was unfortunate. Then I said, okay, well, ExpressVPN says that I should be able to just do a software upgrade and use the NETGEAR firmware, and that should take care of it, which was what my next step was going to be. So I was like, okay, I downloaded the latest firmware for this device from NETGEAR. I uploaded it to the software using, this is through the ExpressVPN interface, because that's all I had at that point. And it says it uploaded just fine. It rebooted the device, and it would reboot and it would come back, and it would be exactly the same. It would be the same ExpressVPN software, giving me the same IP addresses and everything. Nothing changed. I think somewhere in there, it did. Oh yeah, when I did the reset, it did reset the Wi-Fi network to be the default, but it didn't change any of the software on there. So that was frustrating, and I didn't give up though. I kept going with it, and then found a solution that involved connecting it directly to a wired connection on your PC and using TFTP to transfer the file to the device. The instructions that I found were, the device didn't do what the instruction said. It said that you power it off and hold the reset button and power it on, and the lights should do this, and the lights didn't do that. So it was a little unclear when I was supposed to start the TFTP command. When I first started, the TFTP command was not even the TFTP client was not even activated on Windows, so I had to go through that. And of course, every time I do these, I have to disconnect and reconnect, because I gotta go get on the internet to check out how to solve these problems. And then I come back and then try it again, and eventually determine that TFTP was not going to work, because it was just timing out. So did more research and came across a thing called, and let me see if I can find it, it's nmrpflash. I don't know exactly what that is or where it comes from, or if it's something related to NETGEAR, or if it's something just for Wi-Fi devices or what. But and someone had mentioned on a message board that they were able to recover a bricked NETGEAR router using that. Different model router, but I figured I'd give it a try. So I downloaded that. It said that you also need this npcap software. So I downloaded that, and naturally these pieces of software, you look at them and you're like, oh my god, is this a virus that I'm being installing? It seemed like there was enough people that were using it that it seemed okay. So but naturally had the security warnings from Windows when I tried to install them, and got them installed, and then started running through the steps that it gave you to do the flash. And every single time I did it, I got a different error. And so I was running an error, and then I get another error, and I look up what that error is, and I run it again and get another error. And one of the problems was that the ExpressVPN was trying to assign IP addresses on a 192.168.132 network, but this default was looking for a 192.168.1 network, and so you had to manually set network IPs. And the website was pretty good, because it went through all of the different error messages that you might get and what they might be. So what started out as a command that was just say run the command and you pass in the file that you're wanting to do, I ended up having to add like 3 other command line options to it to set a timeout value, to force the IP address to get set to something. I had to change my network interface to be a static IP that was on the network of this router because it was using that ExpressVPN IP addresses. But I got there. It took a while. I probably spent a good 2 hours doing all this stuff, and again, having to unplug and replug it in and restart it and everything else, because some of that process for the nmrpflash requires you to turn it off and turn it back on, and then run the command at a certain point, because if you run it when it's just on, it's not going to work. So it was just a big hassle. But at the end of the day, I got it back, and I was quite happy when I finally connected to it and I saw that it was getting a 192.168.1 address. And then when I connected to that, I got the NETGEAR login, and it did all the stuff, and I was able to log in and see the NETGEAR interface, and everything seems to be working fine. So my $65 is fine because I now have a NETGEAR router that is, once again, a NETGEAR router and not an ExpressVPN router. So a lot of work. So long story short, too late. This was something I had been thinking about doing for a while, using VPN. I was never really sure whether it was something that was worthwhile. I've seen a lot of conflicting reports about it. I was skeptical myself about whether it was worthwhile, but it was something I'd been wanting to try. So we did. It was a relatively small investment to get the router, to be able to do it and give it a try. But the net result is it was more trouble than it was worth. I think the value that you get from having the VPN is not really giving you anything. If you're somebody that is actually going and spoofing your network basically, or by using the proxy server and trying to pretend that you're in another country so you can watch shows, sure, that's probably something that you'll get some value in. Other than that, there's really not much you're going to get out of it. The rest of it is, you're not going to get any more security than you get just by using your browser with anything that's got a padlock on it is going to be secure. And the anonymity, you can certainly find a lot of videos online about how that's not really, you're not as anonymous as you think you are. You get behind a VPN, and sure, your ISP can't see stuff that you're doing, but those records are there. Whether, even if the VPN says they don't log the traffic, well, there's a lot of servers you're jumping through on the internet to get to your VPN server, and every one of those routers and servers that you're going through are logging your traffic. So just because it's the one VPN server is not logging it doesn't mean it's not being logged somewhere. So that's just a false sense of security if you feel like that's giving you some anonymity. Anyway, that is my experience with VPN. I'm not saying don't use it. I'm saying that for us, it doesn't make any sense. ExpressVPN was perfectly fine. Quite disappointed with how difficult it was to get my NETGEAR router back to being a NETGEAR router afterwards. It seems like that I kind of pinned that one on ExpressVPN. I feel like that they could have done something to make that an easier process. But I got there eventually, and ExpressVPN as a software was fine. They did what they said they were going to do. It just simply is not for us. And so that's my experience. I think if you want VPN, make sure you understand exactly what it actually is going to do for you. Don't think that it's going to be some magic bullet that's going to do things that they say it's going to do, but it doesn't really do that stuff. You gotta read the fine print and understand what's going on behind the scenes. And ask yourself if it's worth the nuisances you'll have to put up with for what amounts to a pretty small gain as far as security and other stuff like that. So that's what you got to consider. We went through it, did it for a couple days, made the determination it's not for us. You might have a different conclusion. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, maybe a little more than that on this. And so I'll see what my next project's going to be and what we think of that, and I'll share the results when I figure it out. So thanks.